Tell them that I need more. Tell them that we.
I'm ready.
All right. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Um, you're welcome on Black Hot Fire Network. Good morning from Kampala, Uganda. It's Africa Maria with my colleague INNOSSETU. It's exactly 34 minutes past 8 a.m. here in Kampala, and it's a Friday, 29th of December 2020. Sorry, you're welcome on our live. We apologize for not appearing yesterday, guys. We had issues of electricity, so couldn't make it possible. It wasn't possible for us to be live here, but we are here, and I promise we shall still be here. Now, today's topic, of course, Africa needs independence to develop. As someone may be like, well, Africa has gained its independence for some time now, but like we usually educate you guys here, apparently Africa has just an imaginary independence. But Africa has never broken free from, of course, the colonial rules and the colonialism. We have neo-colonialism again here in Africa. We still experience the use of our colonizers' language as a means of communication. We still believe in the demarcations, which of course happened during the partition of Africa. We still believe in the tribes that were given to us by the colonial masters. We still embrace apparently their education system. We have never been free because we have never been the same as since the colonizers came. Now, the nation that Africa, we know that Africa needs real independence to develop. This topic encompasses various dimensions touching upon historical, political, economic, and social aspects. But of course, We shall be looking at each of these aspects in a different context. Historically, Africa's history is marked by colonization. Africa's history is marked by the colonization of course, European powers carved up with the continent, exploiting its resources and imposing external governance structures. Now, when we say that Africa's history, of course, is comprised, or Africa's history is marked by colonization, is that if no matter how hard you try to look for Africa's history, there is no Africa's true history until the colonizers came to Africa. Nobody wants to talk about the fact and the truth that happened in Africa before the colonizers came to Africa. So, when you check all the history books, apart from a few scholars who have been writing the facts about Africa, many of the books only explain about Africa uh, during the days of colonization. So throughout history, Africa has been marked with that scenario that happened in Africa. Now, if we start to explain that Africa existed before the colonizers, Africa existed 1,000 years before the colonizers came to Africa. But of course, Africa's existence, if according to the books that talk about history, they will definitely explain that the biggest scenarios to talk about happened during colonization. But yes, we know that colonization impacts negative and a lot of negativity. There is a lot of genocide. There is a lot of killings. There is a lot of crimes that were committed on African soil. So I think that it should be marked that since the coming of the colonizers, Africa changed and it was never the same. And even when we celebrate independence, it is actually just a verbal independence. We have not seen practical independence in Africa. We have not seen Africans really experiencing the independence that the majority of probably the world talks about. Now, usually people keep on asking questions like India was, of course, colonized by the British. They still also go ahead. Most people who don't really know what is going on today, someone will tell you the Arab countries were also colonized by the British. Yes, we know. Someone will still continue and tell you that we have seen a lot of continents, a lot of countries that were colonized by the British, but they have grown. They have minerals because Arab countries have gold, but these people do not understand the fact that those places inhabited a few population of the black people before the intermarriages or with these other Bazungus who settled in those places. Two, these people have always been given privileges. These people have been given privileges. I'll give you like the stories in East Africa where we had a lot of Indians. Indians were colonized by the British, but where we had a lot of Indians who were brought to Africa to suppress the Africans' rebellious groups. We saw Indians coming down here to suppress Africans. They were working in the British Army for them to in order to, of course, fight the African countries and the African groups that were trying to, of course, try and rebel against the British rule. And this we have not seen Africans militaries being taken to other countries to fight, during colonization. We have not seen Africans being picked. There is nowhere in history where Africans were picked to go and fight or and kill other people for the British to take control. But we've seen these privileged few people who have been used to suppress Africans, and Indians are among those people. Apart from Africans joining in world wars, of course, this was a world thing. We don't see Africa, of course, involving itself in suppressing other countries or other nations. So someone will still continue and say, we see Africa is or Africa and of course, Arab countries were also colonized by the British. Why is it they have developed so much? I'm talking about the privileged colonized, of course, the privileged colonized territories, the territories that were highly privileged. Um, you still see that these territories that were privilegedly colonized, or the territories that experienced a privilege, were still used against Africans. We also see the Arabs coming here to take slaves to the British. And what history does not tell people is that these are Arabs. By the time the Arab princess, the prince, came to the coast of Zanzibar to carry out, of course, trade. The British already were existing in Oman. When the Prince of Oman came, the British were existing around in Oman. That means there is a big probability that they were ordered to do that. So remember, at that time, Tanzania was a territory of our Germany, of the Germans. So the British knew we cannot do bigger things in Tanzania unless we send other people in another picture. And British people have been doing this for a very long time. We see them coming in different images with different faces. So then we see the Arab people coming at the coast of Zanzibar, apparently, and a lot happened along at that time. And the Arab countries, like the United Arab Emirates, have experienced a certain level of privilege until now. That people look at a city like Qatar, people look at Dubai, and they all keep on saying this: the Arabs, their cities are grown, they are rapidly developed, but little do they know that the biggest shares in these particular cities actually do not belong to the Arab people. United Kingdom has big shares in these Arab countries. The same with Russia. The same with France. So apparently these countries have shares. So it is very important for such countries to develop because they benefit. I refer this to in East Africa. I always refer this to a country like Kenya. Kenya's big shares belong to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom built Kenya. Kenya was the center, was like the heart of the British control over East Africa. So Kenya being the heart of the British control over East Africa, Kenya was advantaged that the British made sure that they constructed Kenya's infrastructure. They made sure that they constructed Kenya's banks. Until now, they still hold shares on Kenya's main banks. And that's why it is important for them to make sure that Kenyan shillings does not lose value, because apparently it's like the Kenyan shillings is owned by the British indirectly. Their money is owned by the British. The British regulate the Kenyan shillings. The British decide on their stake shareholders. The British decide on the stock and the forex that Kenya runs within the Kenyan shilling. So you can see that at some point, these people had usually choose they choose like a few group of Africans and a few countries where they hoped or where they were not harassed a lot. They based there, and I can say those places where they based places that have have, of course, achieved or they have gained the privilege. I'll give you the example of the same example with Uganda. Kampala was developed so very fast more than other places because they were also favored in one way or the other, because it is in the central kingdom that British were not harassed. So whenever they settled somewhere where they would find, they would feel secure, they would develop those places and of course exploit those other places, or suck dry those other places that are very rebellious about them. But of course, the journey of colonization still takes a toll on Africans and Africans' land until now. Say something. Moko. So, true independence implies breaking away from the legacy of colonialism and asserting self determination. When we usually talk about when we usually talk about colon when we usually talk about about Tommy Kola. when when we usually talk about Africa not being independent, I usually see a lot of people against that. We were independent and stuff like that. By independence itself means breaking away from the legacy of colonialism and asserting self determination. We have never broken away from legacy of the colonialism. And actually, I feel even the description of colonialism or independence as we were in school says it all, because it does not, in as we read as we describe independence according to the British education system, it keeps us so comfortable with the little we have. They do not talk about us breaking away from the legacies these people imparted. It does not talk about us deciding on our own or breaking away from the chains. And it gives us that comfortability that no matter how the little we have, we are independent. Because when we look at the elements of independence, we talk about the major, we talk about things that are not really important. They will tell you what shows that our country is independent, all the element of independence. They'll tell you the national anthem. All right, that's just a song. People can sing that, yes. But what's important, in which language are you singing that song? We don't learn about that. The flag, the people remove the Union Jack. Of course, that's a British flag. The Union Jack, they put it down and they raise the Uganda flag or whatever flag at that time in whichever country.
Hello, Maria, and say to good morning.
Hey, good morning, Toby. How are you? How are you? How you have woken up early today? So we hope you're doing good, Joby. So they will tell you the flag, they will tell you what. We don't look at issues like us having our own languages. What's that?
Yeah.
We don't look at issues like us breaking away from the British legacy.
So I.
It's your show nowadays, but good to see you. Yeah. Well, thank you for catching up. Thank you for catching up with us. Yeah, we are so early. Yesterday we didn't have electricity, so We thought and we were like, we might wait for that particular time and then electricity goes off. But nowadays, we've been trying to come very early to catch up with a lot of things. So, yes, but we are glad that, of course, yeah, I'm always up from 6, latest 7 a.m. every day. Ah, okay, okay. You are a hardworking woman.
Holiday is a day, the holiday.
Ah, we are not on holiday. That's why we are here. We don't have any holiday. That's why we are here. Yeah. So, like I was saying that,
But all is good.
yeah, all is good.
Mm,
But I was saying that we don't talk about breaking away from the legacy of colonialism and inserting our self-determination. For their legacy, one is their education system, two, their language, three, the boundaries, four, of course, the tribes that they created, five, which are the five?
the boundary, education, the culture.
The culture, the impulse,
Mm,
yeah, and a lot more other things.
mm,
But we
mm.
talk about the minor things, and apparently,
Right, right.
if the education system told described independence
Mm,
like the way I find it fit me, of course, breaking away from this guy's legacy, we would understand, everyone would know that we have never been independent because we still work in their legacy and we still promote their legacy no matter what. And apparently, this is why we can never find our favor in what we do, because we are two different people. Africans can never be the Western people. We have different things entirely. Of course, there is also the political sovereignty. And we know that real independence involves not only political sovereignty, but also the ability to make decisions free from external influence. Now, many African nations have faced challenges related to neocolonialism, where economic and political decisions are influenced by foreign power or a multinational corporation. We have never been free politically. We have never experienced a free political Africa where people decide the kind of system we are going to, the kind of governance we are going to have. We have, of course, what people call Tulimo politics.
mm.
We, of course,
Multi-party.
there is multi-party, there is ndoza fenafena twafuminga tenaite twafuminga ababritish bakozesa monarchy
Mm,
tukoleya democracy y'Abamerika.
mm,
So we started Britain itself introduced democratic kind of government which it does not use.
mm,
Otegera.
mm,
And democracy has failed Americans.
mm.
We have not seen America being free because democracy has failed them. But of course, if it has failed the people who designed it, then how can it work for the African community? As I thought to do it.
Nakusiba ekikomera era kusiba ekikaali.
So
Mm,
we have never been politically free or together,
yeah.
even to the point that they decide which kind of leader you are going to have. We have seen this through the multi parties. We have seen them supporting opposition and others supporting current governments. The good example is the situation in Uganda, where there of course, Bob Wine is being supported just because he wants to be used as a puppet. We see the same story in South Africa as Julius Marema, and not to skip Kenya, where Ruto is, of course, a puppet of those people. So we are experiencing a government that does not belong to the Africans. We are experiencing a political system that does not benefit the Africans. We are experiencing a political structure that has never and will never work for the Black people. This structure was designed by the colonial masters, and if we do not break free from such kind of things, we shall not develop politically, because development does not only fall on infrastructures, it does not only fall on, the standards of living, but also the how you run the governance. Development is also seen in, first of all, the governance, to the economy, the social life, the cultural life, and everything. So we cannot rely on one sector that, all right, the tea is ready. Are you gonna put it in the flask or are you?
Come take him.
Let me put that.
Come take him. Take him. They are spiced.
Yeah, I think I forgot to put ginger.
What are the ones?
Unyako yongeremuko some little water. Aboito linyawansi. Kaunyam. There is ginger. All right. No, it's okay. Cinnamon. Cinnamon is there. Ojiro you want we to know it on Terra. So I take a flask just a boy to the gamchida. To the gamchida. Is that tea enough or has it boiled and child? Are you sure? All right. So apparently, we need to make decisions free from external influence. We have had enough of the Western world deciding and influencing apparently everything we run or we do here in Africa. Last time we were talking about sanctions that are put on our trade. Apparently, people decide at which price you're going to sell, at which price you should buy. Africans don't have a decision. We don't have room to negotiate. We don't have room to discard. So apparently, everything is of course, as per their warrant. Now we know that Africa has also not experienced economic empowerment. Unless we break away from these people, economic independence is crucial for development. And of course, African countries often face economic challenges where of course, we know that our economy is tied to the exploitation of natural resources and other things. It is very important. Thank you.
Oh. All right. Nyonyola economic empowerment. Whatever you can get once. What the man was this sao?
Ndaba nange biri wansi sinafaiba budde bugenda POLITCAL maje kakomolwawo kye okitegeera wetukomerawo nga muliro netukomawo ne batebanyeewo tebali kutambula
Banakula batya tandika okuwanika emikono yogera naawe bamukomereza
we are taking honey.
Twetaaga bagamba.
Tubagamba mubisi gwa nkiba abajja buuza
Naana naawe
lwaki.
olugambo nno.
Tegwegwe mubisi gwa nkiba. Of course bagenda buuza mu lwaki.
Bagunyomebwa.
Kati balabye enkombako bweno.
Ndaga amaaso. Ndi ku malusu kati.
So we know that achieving real independence means having control over economic policies, fostering domestic independence on foreign domestic independence or on foreign aid, and also us having the ability to have our own industries, which of course we do not. It is so important for the Africans to know and also understand that unless we break free from these aspects, we are not going to see an independent Africa. Like the proverbs of great men used to say that if you give someone the right or the powers to feed them, that means you have given them the power to control you. If they can decide when you should be hungry or not, that means they can decide on what to do. And actually, we have seen this experienced in Africa throughout time. But you get a couple in cool. You know, said
Yeah.
say something.
Okay. When we talk about Africa needing independence to develop, there are a lot of things we should focus on. First of all, um, the people that fought for the first fake independence Africans fought for, their major focus was so much into political kind of independence. That's why very many books they will talk about you know, these are the people, these were the leaders that led to Africa's political independence, of which it was fake. It was a fake political independence. Um, Things like social status, social life, yeah, social life of people. Uh, the social life part of it was not focused on the economic, uh, the economic life in African countries was not focused on. The independences that were fought by the people that led to independence to different African countries, they majorly focused on political independence, of which they gave them a fake independence, fake political independence. Today, we see that what we have today in African countries, it is described as the deliberate and continued survival of colonial system in independent African states by turning these states into victims of political, mental, economic, social, military, and technical forms of dominations carried out through indirect means by the oppressors, by the colonial masters. We see it even up today. We see African countries celebrating independences each year, every year. They celebrate independence. But in reality, African countries, they are not free. We cannot dictate our politics. We cannot dictate our future leaders. We cannot dictate our economic system. We cannot dictate our social life. Our culture has been indoctrinated. Our culture has been changed totally to the normal culture African people would have exhibited by this time, since they we gained independence. Like in Uganda, every 9th October of every year we celebrate independence. But this is not enough. This is not enough when we still see that we have political parties in Uganda that are supported, that are funded by these colonial masters, that our economic system is too much, is having Chinese, is having the British, is having, we see our military is so much of the is so much our our political system is so much of the Russians. Our security system is so much of the Russians. We see Russians one of the country in Europe that supplies military weapons to African countries. Bro, ndale camera now. Ogenda gimutwalira wali ku boda. Ani amutwalire? Muwogo singa omulaba ojja kutya. Alize nne tukola kuba eddakiika zikyali wansi. So, when we talk about this new form of independence, we know that in Africa we are experiencing what we call neo-colonialism today. In this, we know that towards the late of the 19th century through to the later half of the 20th century, some of the European countries such as Britain, France, Belgium, and Portugal had colonized a large number of African nations, setting up economic systems that allowed for seemingly extensive exploitation. Decades after the World War II, we see that these European nations granted political independence to their colonies in Africa, but still found a way to retain their economic influence and power over the former colonies. From the 1950s, when many African colonies began to gain independence, they soon realized that the actual liberation that they had anticipated was outlandish. So, in spite of as the assumptions of Africans to political leadership positions, Africans soon realized that the economic and political atmosphere was still under some form of control of the former colonial masters. By implying by implication, post-colonial Africa continued to experience the domination of the Western-styled economic model that was prevalent during the colonial that the period of colonialism. We know that it doesn't appear that the former colonial masters only wanted to grant political independence to their former colonies and did not want them to liberate from colonialism. This is why it is referred that this situation is referred to a situation which is in form of ideological implementation of neocolonialism in Africa. We know that it began immediately after the political independence of most African states in African countries. In post-colonial Africa, events and situations have revealed that how neocolonialism was nurtured from the moment of independence was granted. The element of neocolonial influences that are apparent with the interactions continually exist between former colonial masters and their former colonies attest to the assertion. For example, the point could be made with regards on the ongoing interactions between France and Francophone African countries such as Cameroon, Congo, Togo, Ivory Coast, among others, as well as between Britain and Anglophone African countries such as Ghana, Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria, and Gambia. We know that, of course, in the case of Cameroon, particularly after the amalgamation of French Cameroon with South British Cameroon in 1961, the granting of political independence to Cameroon by France was dependent on certain negotiations on matters of defense, foreign policy, finance, and economy, as well as the technical assistance. This resulted in the adoption of institutionalization of the French Fifth Republic constitutional model. We see that even the constitutions we have in African countries, most of the African countries, they are not African-based constitutions. So, alongside French political, economic, monetary, and cultural dominance in the new Cameroon, following the creation of the French flank zone, which established the franc CFA as the general currency for all francophone countries. The West African colonies became tied in the fixed parity of course, the French flank. We see that most former colonies of French, they use francs, amafaranga, as their money. Eh, they use they use amafaranga. So automatically granting the French government control over the financial and budgetary activities in francophone countries. France also continued its military presence in Cameroon after independence. France established military and defense assistance agreements with Cameroon. Furthermore, the French institutionalized the linguistic and cultural links with its former colonies, thereby creating the La Francophonie heading, which served as a platform for reinforcing the assimilation of French language, culture, and ideology. Although, although Britain may have continued to maintain an indirect economic influence through multinational corporations on its former colonies, the direct effects of British neo-colonial social, political, and political ideologies have diminished significantly over the years. However, the West in general maintains the indirect form of domination over all developing African countries through means of such as loans from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund (IMF). This form of neocolonialism is done through foreign aids or foreign direct investments where strict or serve as financial conditionalities are imposed, such conditionalities we know that often renders the neo-colonial state to the economic and sometimes political will of foreign donor. Clearly, from the brief history of neocolonialism in Africa, one can see that neocolonialism itself had an ethical dimension of history of contemporary Africa. This is why we still see existence of colonial masters in African countries today.
obutono tebubaba. Obutono obunene tebubaba ng'obutono.
Kiwedde ensonga nguguwedde.
Mugwan, you can't do. Tokikola. Genda mu maaso.
Ogwange guwadde okuggyako. Colonialism, it has stages. It started with colonizing Africa. Whites were here in Africa for some time. But what we see in African countries today, and why we say African countries don't have independence today, we see what we call neocolonialism. And this could be one of the last stages of independence, colonialism or imperialism in Africa. We know that after the independence of most African states in in African nations, most African nations after getting independence in the early 1960s, 50s, actually, yeah, 50s. Country yasooka mu Africa okufuna independence yali 1958, Ghana.
Mm.
I think it was the first.
Mm.
So we see that after the independence of most African nations, Africans soon began to notice that their countries were being subjected to new form of colonialism.
Mm.
We still see this waged by these former colonialists and some other developed nations.
Mm.
It is pertinent to mention that even though neocolonialism is a propagation of socio-economic and sometimes political activities of former colonial overlords
Mm.
in their ex-colonies,
Mm.
it is documented evidence, the documented evidence has shown that the country that was never colonized can never become neo-colonialistic state.
Mm.
Hmm?
Mm.
So countries such as Liberia, Ethiopia that never experienced colonialism in the classical sense
Mm.
have become neo-colonial states by dint of their real, real like relying on internal financial capital,
Mm.
courtesy of its fragile economic structure. It is based on this that neocolonialism can be said to be new form of colonial exploitation and control over the new independent states of Africa and other African states with fragile economies. Hmm?
Mm.
Nkrumah views or viewed neocolonialism as a form of subjugation of economic, social, cultural, and political life of the Africans. His postulation is that European imperialism of Africa has passed through several stages from slavery to colonialism and subsequently to neocolonialism that we are having today,
Mm.
being the last stage of colonialism or imperialism, subjugation, and exploitation process. Nkrumah, of course, in 1965, he said that the last stage of imperialism is an analysis of neo-colonialism in relation to imperialism.
Mm.
Those two words, they seem to be the same, but they are different. Neo-colonialism, imperialism, and colonialism.
Mm.
Kitegeera?
Mhm.
We see that the need to recognize that colonialism had yet to be abolished in Africa, rather it had evolved into what he calls what we have as neocolonialism.
Mm.
Nkrumah revealed that the methods that the West used in its shift into tactics of from colonialism to neocolonialism
Mm.
without a calm to dispenses with its flags and claims that were giving independence to its former subjects to be followed by the aid for their development. Nti bano abasajja ba raising down their flags. Is it
Mm.
raising down?
Mm. So
Nti,
raising it
nti,
down, Obama.
so they right about now we cannot see like
Oba
oba
bagitunuulira
Union
dda.
Jack.
Mm.
Se bayita bandera y'Abangereza.
Eya British.
Flag.
Eya
Union
British.
Jack.
Mm.
Union Jack.
Union Jack.
So it is not very easy to see today in African countries like Uganda to see a Union Jack or kind of let for whatever kind
Okujjako
of flag
baziteeka
of
mu
the
mmotoka.
oppressors.
Okujjako baziteeka mu mamotoka.
But it is not easy. Bo baateekangayo nga tewali ateekayo mulala.
Mm.
Okitegeera? It is difficult today to see that in
Those
African
flags
countries.
flying.
Yeah. But we see foreign aid. Oh, I'm such a mother.
Nkwa kyajja mmokyeza ddala. Uriya mu- Alright.
So it is very difficult to see flags of Western people in African countries, but we see foreign aid, we see military. I won't call it military support because it is not necessary because they are the same people that are creating insecurity in African countries. So their security support or army or what, it is not necessary.
They bring it here in this guise.
It is necessary. So, mhm.
So
so So Nkrumah contends that neocolonialism is usually exercised through economic or monetary means as part of methods of control in a neo-colonial state. So today we have neo-colonial states, not colonial states. Check it out. We have neo-colonial what? Neo-colonial states. So
Kare. Bye.
So the imperialistic power and control over the state is gained through contribution to the cost of running the state, promotion of civil servants into positions that allow them to dictate the world power, mm,
Mm.
uh, through monetary control of foreign exchange by the imposition of banking system that favors the imperial system. Okitegeera? So, on the link between neocolonialism and imperialism, Nkrumah writes that neocolonialism is the worst and most form of imperialism. For those who practice it, it is ensures power without responsibility and unchecked exploitation for those who suffer for it. Okitegeera? Unchecked exploitation. Okitegeera? Because they have influence over everything. It's a settled.
Kati nno omutaka alina hago. Alina engeri gy'awuzeemu sofa. Emmere n'agireka. Awuusa oba eddala agiyisa kajiiko n'omuntu omulaba amuliddeko.
So we know that Nkrumah explained that that neocolonialism, its exploitation, is implemented in the political, religious, ideological, and economic and cultural spheres of society. This further provides details of infiltration and manipulation of organized labor by agencies of the Western in African countries. We know that the enormous monopoly of the press in African countries, it also shows that Africa, we are not together. Africans, we are not we are not free. We are not independent. We know that monopoly of the press by the Western influence, together with the outflow of sleek, clever, and expensive magazines, tends to what it chooses to call the new form of colonialism, which is neo-colonialism. Okitegeera? Um,
Kanjogereko gyatandikira ngenda nakwoza bintu. Tunana kuweza. So, as we look at development, of course, real independence goes beyond political and economic aspects to encompass social development. And of course, this includes investing in African kind of education, investing in our own healthcare system and the social infrastructure, which aim to improve the well-being of the population, of course, which empowers the local communities. Uh, and of course, we know once we empower the local communities, we have achieved genuinely as a nation, which is not seen in today's kind of development. Where the last time we were here, we even talked about how we have that class difference. Apparently, the local people are not even benefiting from this kind of system that this kind of structure that was imposed on the African nation. Um, and different countries, because we have experienced this, that there is a level of there is a level, or there are hierarchies in this kind of governances throughout history. Yes, each African or a clan knew their role, but they were bosses in their particular roles. Everyone knew and respected and worshipped a clan according to their role. Though some other people look at such kind of things like, all right, how can this clan be the clan that buries the other? It doesn't make sense. But people were respected because that was their responsibility. So each one knew if you don't handle them well, the next time no one is going to bury you. So there are also those other clans which were known for farming. They were respected. They were good farmers. They understood what to do. They understood the weather. They were respected, and there were bosses in that area, because at any time if you don't respect them, then you may fail to get what to eat. And they were very proud in this. Now, the difference of this kind of social structure that was imposed on the African system is that we have a huge difference between the poor people and the rich people, to the point that we do not have infrastructural benefit. Because of what instance is it for you to build those beautiful roads in the city when the people in the urban areas have never even had a touch of it? Of what importance is you constructing beautiful hospitals, first class hospitals in the cities, when the people in the rural areas have never had a touch of that? So we have a very big difference, and these kind of differences were brought by the colonialists, because during their control over Africa, they had a few of the Africans who were, of course, advantaged. Those others who had advantage towards them. So they would even decide that if you do this for me, I'm going to give you this in return. We saw them selling out to their own people just to earn, benefit from the colonial masters. So privilege or privilegism is a system that was built or constructed by the colonial masters, and uh, until now we still experience the same. That's why we even have tribalism. A lot of these tribes that were favored then are still favored till to date. You will go to the office and you realize that, well, there is a certain tribe that cannot work over there. There is another tribe which is supposed. Now, these are the privileged kind of system that were introduced here. In Africa, before we were one, we were doing things. Yes, maybe we are doing things differently. Each clan had their own duty, but everyone knew why this clan is doing this. Everyone respected the fact that they are different in that way, and they were worshipped in their differences. Unlike today. And until we wake up and realize that we cannot live without each other, I'm sorry, we may not see a developing Africa. Because if we decide to say that we are only segregating the rich from the poor, and the rich should benefit, if at all we are going to have infrastructures that only benefit the rich, that when you construct these infrastructures, you put them at a high cost that the poor cannot afford. That if you start constructing good hospitals, you're going to make other services very expensive that a certain category of people will not benefit from. This is not the Africa we want to see, but this is the neo-colonized Africa, where we still believe in segregation, where we still believe in privileges, where we still believe that there is a difference between the same race of people, that there is a difference between the poor and the rich, and this was not the Africa before the colonizers. Oh. So when we also also look at the culture. Of course, the true independence involves the preservation and promotion of cultural identity. All right, this includes language. All right, this includes traditions and values, embracing cultural diversity and leveraging it from national development. Of course, this can contribute to a stronger sense of independence if we have our own language. We can identify ourselves with our different languages, the tradition, and the values. When we embrace cultural diversity, which we are not doing. And as we speak right now, even we are using English, which is the colonial master's language. But this is the language that apparently 95% of the African population understands. Now, if we still use this as a means of communication, an international and a local means of communication, that means we are still being colonized because we do not have that sense of language, that sense of identity. We don't have that sense of belonging. We are still using somebody else's language, which is, of course, becomes a barrier to those other people who have not attended the education system of the colonizers. That's why I usually say, and I usually tell people, you can never measure the degree or level of someone's intelligence. Of course, depending on how profound their English pronunciation is, or on how fluent their English is, because apparently English is just the language. But Africans always tend to judge somebody on how their English is and whatever. Though okwogera olulimi nga ngenda enjoze nga bw'oyogera. Political instability and conflicts have hindered development in some African regions. Real independence requires the establishment of stable governance, and of course, effective institutions and mechanisms for conflict resolution to create an environment conducive to our development. It is very vital for the colonizer, man, enswera bijjeewo ebimere nyamba oba tubisuule tubisuule si nnyo gitwaleyo bwe tunaabireka nga tubisuula tuyinza obisuula ate so emwokyeza so like I say, it is very vital for these colonizers to keep us, to keep I mean, politically unstable, to keep us having those conflicts, like the conflicts we are seeing in Congo and other countries where Africans are fighting each other, because where there is conflict there can never be development, there can never be education in different aspects, there can never be a normal life. And when someone is not living a normal life, you don't even think that they will think normally like other people. They will never demand for the important things, but rather or the only thing they will demand for is to live, to stay alive. It is just like the survival of the fittest over there. So most people cannot see beyond the survival. So if a continent or a country does not have peace, at times these people are taken advantage of. I'll give you the good example of the situation in Congo, where apparently Congolese know they have minerals, but they are not even talking about the swindling of their minerals, because the only thing they can think about is surviving. How can they survive? To the point that they are worshipping the same people who are causing these conflicts. They are worshipping the same people who are causing the instabilities. They are worshipping the same people who are exploiting their resources, because these people always tell them, all right, after coming as a refugee, we are taking you to Canada or somewhere else. And they are only excited about that because all they want is to move out of Congo and, of course, have a peaceful country, rather than them focusing on the major issue like why do we have this conflict, why are we not benefiting from our minerals. All they are thinking about is how to leave Congo. And this kind of community, or this kind of a country that has people thinking this way, is a country that is going to be exploited for a very, very extremely long time. Now, African nations collaborating on regional levels can enhance, of course, their collective bargaining power and promote shared development goals. Now, regional integration can lead to stronger economic blocks, improved infrastructure, and increased resilience to global economic pressure. We have not been dealing with, we don't have that trade independence. Last time I was saying that we have different trade groups that limit us from, of course, dealing with the other countries that are not under that umbrella. We have ECOWAS. Not all African countries are under ECOWAS, but a few African countries. So you cannot run trade with ECOWAS when you are not under the umbrella of ECOWAS. Now, when we look at the structure of this system that we usually talk about, are of course organizations that were set up by the colonial masters in disguise. Yes, they will put a president who is an African president, but at the end of the day, they are the ones who are deciding what to do, what not to do, the price you should run your, you should do, which country you should trade with. Of course, recently you saw the situation of Uganda, where Uganda refused homosexuality, and people were coming out. The colonial masters came out and they were stopping other countries from carrying out trade with Uganda. How can you decide, think that you can dictate which country should trade with which, just because they have not been in, or they have not favored your demands, or they have not complied with their demands? So we need regional integration. We need that strongly in order for us to develop. We need regional integration. We need to break away from, of course, trade colonialism, or the trade policy and the sanctions that they impose on the Africans. Now, Africa needs to break free from their technology and their innovations. And of course, real independence involves embracing technology and fostering innovation. Now, building a knowledge based economy, investing in research and development, and leveraging technological advancement can position Africa's nation as active participants in the global economy. For some good time, we are trying to develop technologically, but we still depend on those other people's technology, and usually their technology is never in favor of Africa's development. Well, at times, as they introduce their technology, it comes with expenses. It comes with expenses that, at times, we embrace things that even cause us harm, insecurities, and other things. So Africa needs to stand out from the rest and start to build its own technology, and also innovate with the other innovation plans, in order for us to be able to compete and outcompete our competitors. For a very long time, we have depended on other people's choices. I'm going to give you an example of electronics. It is very hard to see Africans receiving a brand new thing here. Most of the things we receive are second hand, they are used. Starting from the gadgets, starting from the phones, the laptops, whatever. Most of the things we receive are used things, though others are fairly used, others are extremely used. It is very hard to see Africans receiving things that are brand new. And if at all the biggest percentage of Africans consume used technology, or used gadgets, technological gadgets, then where does this position the African people. Apart from China, which is trying to bring brand new, and of course it's fake, we have not seen other big manufacturers trying to supply brand new equipment to Africa. Hapo impulira nfa oba kenge kenjiyeeyo gwowulira otya ndeeta emmere tulye.
Soko lugere mwali mwalete.
Then
Nchai.
achieving real independence requires strong institution, transparency, and good governance. Now, addressing issues like corruption and ensuring that leaders are accountable to their citizens are crucial steps in the path of genuine independence. For a very long time, we've been, of course, talking about corruption. Corruption is a sign that government is not good, it's not doing good at all. If at all people think they can take advantage of others, should put it out. But njogera kandeete chai.
Genda lete.
Kiki kino gwe?
So, like I talked about, like I said, neocolonialism or is usually exercised through military means as part of methods of control in neo-colonialistic states. I say the imperialistic power control over the state it's gained through contribution of the cost running of the state and promotion of civil positions to allow and dictate the world power of that country. We see that neocolonialism has adverse effects that we are going through in Africa countries. Why do we need independence in Africa? We see that neo-colonialism results in the exploitation of different sectors of a country, of different African countries, different sectors in African countries. We talk about economic declines, slow developments in African countries, but the reason behind all this entire process, this entire system, this entire downflow, decline of economic systems of the economies in African countries results from neocolonialism because it intends on exploiting of different sectors of African nations. We know that using forms and methods result from colonialism is foreign capital used to exploitation rather than development of the less developed parts of the world. Investment under neo-colonialism increases rather than decreases the gap. Thank you. Rather than decreases. mm, let me double up. Rather than rather than for the development of the less developed parts of the world. We know that investment under neocolonialism increases rather than decreases the gap between the rich and the poor of the world in African countries. We know that on the link between neocolonialism and imperialism, we know that neocolonialism is the worst of the most form of colonialism, like I said. When we look at at the press, Hollywood takes care of the fiction, the enormous monopoly of the press, together with the outflow of sleek, clever, expensive magazines at tends to what it chooses to call news. So religion too can be another form of colonialism in African countries. However, religion was brought in Africa during colonialism, but it is also a clear indicator of neocolonialism in Africa because Africans we had our own religion here. But why is it that Africans still use religions of the oppressors, of the colonial masters? Yet, 1,000 years ago in Africa, we had our religion. We didn't know about the religions that we have today, the Christianity, the religions we have today, and people go down to these religions. It is also another clear indicator that we are not uh, independent as yet. We know that buttressing the above submission, we know that the historical conjecture of neocolonialism and underdevelopment in Nigeria 2013 traces the root of underdevelopment in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, to the effects of neocolonialism. In this assertion, African countries have never been fully independent after colonialism had left because the idea of partnering with the ex-colonialists has continued to guide the state economic uh, has continued to guide the state economic policies. Foreign firms have continued to dominate the business sectors of economies in Africa, such as the literally few, but large and integrated um, for big firms otherwise, called multinational corporations, have made themselves indispensable to growth otherwise of the economy. Local industries in Africa are extensions of metropolitan firms such as the needed raw materials for industries depend on very high import content of industrial investments in Africa on capitalistic intensive technology is strictly aimed at further developing metropolitan economies. So we know that West neo-colonialists have collaborated uh, with the local people in Africa to perpetuate the exploitation of the people and state economies in Africa.
Mutera Mbakuli.
Most, most of their aims is to ensure the continued reproduction of foreign domination of African economies. So the local people are bereft of ideas capable of course, endangering the growth of development. The objective of foreign capital, therefore, is to continue to co-opt the weak local people. Capital condemned the former to the position of course, the political leaders in Africa. In addition to that, neocolonialism is a new form of imperial rule characterized by the domination of foreign capital. We know that that is instead of real independence, what Africa has to forego now. You know, African countries now go in a trapping of illusion of freedom. They lied Africans like Mbubagenda kufuna like independence. They are going uh, to work on their own affairs politically. But all this is illusion in African countries. We know that our concern that the different African economies have become willing tools in the hands of the West because of their fragility. And this fragility is created by the West because uh, they have not given a chance for Africans to believe we as Africans that we can do something out of our resources, that we can work on our own issues. That's why Africans we refer to ourselves as fragile for years. We don't believe in our economies. We don't believe in our hands of work. We don't believe that we can do better without the state of the Western economies in African countries. Zino za kawaida bwezi. Tugenda gwana sawa 5. Zange ziriwa. Na ebintu gye bills. Tesigenda kunaaba. So that is Africa on the worst. So there is a myth of neocolonialism in Africa. We know that asserts that African nations continue to depend on the Western industrial nations for economic aid, loans, investment, markets, and other technical assistance because they require this dependence for their development. However, in spite of the end of colonialism in Africa, we know that economic presence of the West is imperative for the future progress of Africa's socio-economic and political stability. The assumption is that the only fruitful economic arrangements with the Western industrialized countries may guarantee Africa's future. This is nonsense. So, kati njagala kulumba. Ekido. Ogenda ddi? Ogenda ddi? Malayo. So, the heavy dependence on the heavy dependence on foreign aid and apparent activities of multinational corporations in Africa reveal that Africa, at the beginning of the 21st century, is still in neo-chronological stage of development. The activities we know of the corporations in Africa, particularly those from Europe and America, reveal nothing short of economic exploitation and cultural domination. Early 21st century Africa is witnessing neo-colonialism from different fronts, from the influences of the transnational corporations from Europe and America to form to form of a new imperial China, which many African governments now seem obligated to. The establishment, nene ebintu ebiba biwogana nnyo mukwano, simanyi oba okimanyi. Oba tekikola makulu. Nedda nkubuulira mazima, tekikola makulu. You can't say sorry and you still do the same thing. Sorry eba eruuziza meaning. Nga wayagala. The establishment of multinational corporations and more recently Chinese interests in Africa through Chinese companies appear mainly to exist for the benefits of the home economies of neo-colonialists than to infuse local African economies with cash to stimulate growth and increase local capacity. In the Africa of the early 21st century, we know that uh, um, the new form of neocolonialism is a globalization, much as the way that neocolonialism has been variously described as uh, as itself to be uh, as itself to be handmaiden to the ruthless capitalism, increases the danger of warfare by remote control. By remote control, by remote control of of course deepens the divide between the haves and have-nots and accelerates damage to our environment in Africa. The negative perspective on globalization, particularly as it relates to extreme capitalism, essentially collaborates the assertion that uh, that globalization is only the latest stage of European economic and cultural domination of the rest of the world, which started with colonialism that went through imperialism has now arrived at globalization stage. Looking at globalization, in this way, we know that the corridor of neocolonialism and cultural subjugation, globalization becomes the imposition of particular culture and value uh, system upon other nations with the direct intent of exploitation. What this indicates is the globalization is indeed the engine room of propagation of neocolonialism and new imperialism in the African soil. While colonialism has ended, the reality on the ground in Africa in the immediate years after it is that political independence in many African states has not culminated in the much desired economic and cultural freedom. The greatest venture upon which the negative impact of globalization in Africa rests primarily is the erosion of African cultural heritage. Upon this heritage hangs the political, economic, social, education subjugation of the continent of Africa, the forcible integration identity and cultural dilemma for the African. Africa has had to be dependent upon Europe and America, and more recently upon China for its development, and one might add actually the development of her identity and culture. Um, a radical position which seeks to have sufficient bearing of Africa's consideration of the inherited benefits of globalization defends globalization and suggests that its benefit must be harnessed by regrettable impacts such as hostility to the economic, social, and political development of the continent. Africa must address the challenges of modernity and globalization by embracing them instead of being forced. Get up. Get up.
Nzimugumi.
Get up.
Butterfly. So
It's
let
a
me
Friday. Lando, what's up, Innocetu and Maria? Greetings, family. What is the topic of the day? Of course, the topic of the day, Lando, is Africa needs independence to develop. Africa, we are going through neo-colonialism, so we are not independent. So our topic today is we need the independence, we need independence to develop in Africa. That is the topic of the day today. Of course, Nando, thank you for coming through this morning.
Yeah.
Hope you're doing
It's
good and
night over
great.
there.
Yeah. Colonialism hasn't ended in Africa, it has been preceded by neo-colonialism. Exactly, Lando.
How do you hear read? People go. Maybe I'm okay. Lando. What do you think about that topic? Why do you do that? Uncle, your goose. We as Africans have experienced abo ibugumya. Kyaka kasefuriya katono biyiwemu. Because I may not be able. This one is mine. This is my tea. Thank you. Yeah. Look at mine. Put it back on fire. But is there some fire? Yeah. So like we've been saying that we have experienced we have been experiencing different forms of colonization. Just like Lando said, now we are in the neo-colonialism, the imperialism of the Western world. And we know that China's embracing New Africa is also a strategy that was built by the Americans. Gwajo, supposed to be yesterday. Because I think she had put long time. So we have experienced this. We cannot say that we are independent if we still use the same languages, if we are still embracing or promoting our colonizers' legacies, like their language, their political system, their economical system, their culture. And at all, when you have attended school here in Africa, you will understand that the description of independence does not involve breaking free from these people's legacy. All they will tell you probably is when the Africans have achieved the power. In a simple form, you achieve power away from the colonial masters. But this is not, we have not achieved any, we have not broken away from their power. We have rather evolved to another phase, like Lando says, the phase of course, neo-colonialism. The topic is a needed conversation because the continental is the salvation of all African abroad and the continent. Exactly, Jib Jabba. Sorry, Lando. Bring your ass back here. Where you go? It's it's not what I meant. Okay, so like we are being watched by three Katuvanga Nabugamba Jibja by because I just said it. The topic is leave me alone. You know that we never broke away from these people's legacy. They left their legacy here. And unfortunately, we are protecting this legacy and then we keep it moving. Lando says a unification of the continent is the only solution to free us from colonialism. Yes, we still have their legacy of the boundaries, the tribes, the boundaries, the demarcation that, of course, they brought during the days of partition, where they are trying to scramble and partition for the African land. We are still protecting that legacy, that we still embrace those demarcations. We still identify ourselves under that the same border system that they introduced. So just like Lando says that we need to break away, we need to unite. The unification of Africa is the only way we can achieve this, straight up from the boundaries to trade, to common language, to common currency, to, of course, sharing our culture and heritage and a lot of stuff. So we have not embraced Africa. We as African people, we have not embraced Africa as a nation. We have rather embraced the demarcation, the small places that they have put, the small cells that they have locked us into. We have not embraced Africa as Africa, but rather identify ourselves with those small cells. We are like the small prisons that we have been tied, and the small prisons that we have been confiscated into, the small prisons that have confiscated our freedom of expanding our minds beyond the territories. I identify myself as a Ugandan, and INNOSSETU does identify himself as something else, and another identifies themselves. So before you are even this thing, you are an African. So before you even identify yourself as a Ugandan, you are an African. But rather, it is the vice versa in Africa. So we have rather embraced and gave a lot of importance to these borders that were created by the colonizers, and yet we still proclaim and, of course, teach that we are independence. Independence means breaking away from the legacy of those people and reclaiming ourselves, ownership, our self ownership that we do not have. So if at all we cannot break away from these people, if at all we cannot say we are never going to promote their legacy, then we can never be independent. We must remove all foreign religion, political system, and the European education system in order to free from colonialism. I do agree with you, Lando, 100%. Um, Religion is also another form of, control.
That's what I've been talking about.
It is another form of control, because religion, first of all, has prohibited a lot of Africans from seeing things the way they are supposed to see them. Religion has hindered us from understanding the matrix and the game. First of all, religion gives a supreme power to the colonizers. First of all, it identifies them as the super being. It also categorizes them as the gods that we ought to worship. It also categorizes them as the holy people. Religion favors them in and out. And there is no way you can tell a religious person that, you know what Mzungu is doing for you, to you, is not right. Mzungu is your enemy. They can never believe Mzungu being your enemy when their Jesus is just as Mzungu. And Religion, I should say, is one of the of the key factors that have kept us lagging behind. Yeah. Mm. Yes, now. People go me. Oh, kaswera kako kagenda weza. Ate bakolako topic eyo. Kyokka abaana tebeewummuza. Naye nga indirectly baba banga abaganda ffe.
Nengo China kulapa.
Religion is the main source of control. Everything stems from the European religion. It created their educational side-based system basing on lies. Exactly, Lando. I finished. That was quick. And your tea? You finished that tea? Bro. Okay. You know that it's the religious missionaries who introduced the education system. Mm-hmm.
Like I already said. Most of the power school, most of the legendary powerful institutions in Africa.
Are you sure?
Your browser has lost connection to your camera. Make sure you have the right camera selected.
Take our camera one. Once.
Yes, they're going.
We are streaming with audio.
No, I was saying that most of the education institutions in most African countries, these are religious based institutions. When you look at the universities, when you look at, apart from the public universities, but it is still these oppressors, they have an influence in these universities. Because recently in Uganda we had degrees that had expired, but it was an order from US, from a certain of course university from US, that is clarified that your degrees are expiring, that are expiring in Africa.
Mm.
Okitegeera? So most of the biggest
National
institutions,
Council of Higher Education.
anti kati eyo eyina egiwa orders, university egiwa orders from US.
Ate ndabika ngimanyi ngyerabidde erinnya.
Yeah. So most institutions, education institutions in African countries, they are religious based. They have those religious energies that back up for religion. They have that backup religion. So religion is the main source of all European system control and technology. Yeah. Religion has bonded the projected us backwards in our thinking. True. People in Africa, they're gonna be okay. But people, there is a way they praise religion, like people forget about everything. Like they focus on religion, but religion is based on division, on dividing.
It's another political
And
system.
simanyi oba, because I'm seeing now some religions today, they make judgments for people. We are told that if you do something wrong, they can forgive you. If at all you can confess, and of course you're forgiven. But I'm seeing some religions today in African countries, when someone does something evil, right here in Uganda, when somebody does something evil, they seem not to, they seem unapologetic. They like, they can't forgive this person. They don't even pray for this person. I don't know whether this is part of their what, their agendas or their constitution. It's based with their
You can
constitution.
only forgive a Mzungu.
Yeah, but this, they're not forgiving the Bazungus that enslaved Africans, millions of Africans from Africa, taking them to Europe. Okitegeera? But we are focusing
Baba
on,
forgiving done because of religion.
we are focusing, religion is focusing on fake issues in Africa. And you see that most of these, I've seen very many NGOs in Africa, here in Uganda actually. Most of the NGOs, they first collaborate with the church. You see those people, they first see church. Okitegeera? Those are, they told them that Africans, they are too much into religion and religious issues. So whenever organizations, NGOs come from Africa, Bazungu NGOs, you will see them moving with priests. Okitegeera? They will move with priests. They'll move with priests. So that is religion. Yogerako.
Mbadde ngaaya.
Yogerako. Okanyangire nga naaba nga omaliriza.
Ngenda kwoza bintu.
Eddakiika 13.
Ogenda naaba nga nze bwensiimuula. Lw'omaliriza onaaba nga mmaze.
Nze ngenda kunaaba maaso gokka.
Amaaso galinde. I thought it was something big than my maaso. Tugenda mala. So there is a country like
Before
they divided us, they had to bind our psyche with self-hatred, and then the confusion led to our self-destruction. Religion was the key to that. Self-hatred. First of all, we were divided according to our different
for me, I'm a
religion.
Muslim. For me, I'm a Protestant.
I'm
I'm
a
a Catholic.
Catholic.
So of course, you're divided already.
So for those who are not Catholics, they are not holy.
Mm, mm,
You would love a Catholic who is an Italian
mm.
rather than loving a Muslim who is an
An
African.
African.
You would love and die and kill for a Catholic who is from Rome. And when you are killing your African, your fellow brother whom you share the same culture, even if that person is your brother from the same womb, even if you know that this is INNOSSETU, I've been with the INNOSSETU, but if INNOSSETU is a Muslim and I'm a Catholic, I can kill INNOSSETU for for an Italian or a Mzungu. Now that's how crazy religion was, because when it came to religion, no boundary was small. When it came to religion, you don't even talk about borders. When it comes to religion, you don't talk about languages. When it comes to religion, you don't talk about blood relations. Religion in Africa is on another level. People are willing to die. People are willing to do crazy things in the name of religion. And I think the Bazungu really succeeded on this thing. We have been having wars. We still have even religious wars. Even the situation in Congo, even if we have some rebels, it also has a religious context in it. The Catholics and I think the Protestants and something like that. All right. Whew, I'm full. I'll come out back in a minute. I'm just full. Yeah, chocolate. Soma comment sana.
Bali byensoma. Religion was used to deconstruct our humanity in order to enslave us globally. This is true. There is that artificial, that forged unity these people try to create among African nations, African countries, in the form of religion for their own benefits. There
Where's
is
your cup?
Chirimunda. There is that forged. Tangu tumalize. Eddakiika wabulayo mwenda. Endaba weefuula bize. Gazeeko kuli ojjako gaaki okigazzaako kuli. Ate gagyeko.
Stop doing that.
I was saying that there is that forged kind of unity these people are creating in the form of religion. You know, people have that confidence that we are together when we are of the same religion, but in reality, they are forgetting that it is dividing Africans in two parts. Because even the religious people we talk about, the religious countries we know about, when Africans still go to those countries, they are segregated because of their race and color. They are segregated, yet they seem to be of the same religion. So religion doesn't make any positive impact towards uniting Africans and make people one, rather dividing Africans.
You know that situation.
Religion is the basis of white supremacy. Of course, Jesus is white. Jesus is white. Okitegeera? I normally watch some clips when some African bishops when they meet the Pope.
Yeah, have you seen that scenario? The recent scenario.
Mm,
Um, the Pope is being dragged all over social media for agreeing same-sex marriage. So I'm sure no guy he was pushed to agree on this because the people who want homosexuality in Africa are saying that the only way Africans are denying homosexuality is religious based.
mm, mm.
And so if at all, we do that. Why? Are you sure? I'm going to bully that. Hey, just some taller. So they dragged the Pope. Now the reason why Pope was pushed to declare this publicly was to they wanted to shaken the Catholic foundation because for a very long time that these are Catholic in St. Peter's Basilica, homosexual has been a daily thing. But you cannot tell this to normal Catholics, like the local Catholics. You cannot tell them that there is homosexuality in that system. Watch together. And it is only those people out there who understand there is homosexuality in that system. So they had to make the Pope declare this. And now the church has been shaken. They are doing this because they have realized that a lot of people are staunchly believing into this. And the reason why most of African countries are rejecting homosexuality is religious based. They are not giving you any other explanation rather than the religion. God does not believe in that. Even they don't know that this was forbidden throughout history. But of course, you will see some other homosexual black people, because of course we have black people who are homosexuals, both in Africa and also in the US. Most of them have their own doctrination. They have their own concept that homosexuality existed. There were no man. Oh my God, the world is so disorganized. At times, I listen to these so-called conscious brothers. I always listen to their preachings or on other platforms, and I'm like, is this dude really fine? So almost gay black men, it is okay for you to do your homosexuality. But again, it's so stupid for you to think this was and you cannot be in America, you cannot be in the US apparently, and then you think I don't understand my culture. Me, maybe someone else, but not me. We have this information has been on, and we have been protecting the education, the knowledge of our culture and how it has been carried on, not from the books, at least not from me. Maybe other people have learned it from their books. I had it from my great grandparents. My great grandparents carried this from their greats and greats and greats. So you cannot wake up and then decide, throughout history, there were no women. The black in Africa, we the black people, we are homosexuals. So apparently they are trying to say there were no women. They don't know that we had a woman. We had a woman who created who created a man and a woman. All right. And they don't know this. So apparently we are so pollutioned in our mind. We are very polluted that even we don't understand how things run. And for you, simply because you have read a book of a homosexual who has written the context of homosexuality, and then you want to impose this on entire world, and I'm like, what the are they okay? But of course, that is it. And that is what I guess other people are trying to form their own doctrination. They're trying to form their own way of making Africans believe in different things, just like we see other religious people. Apart from the introduction of Christianity in Africa and other foreign religion, we have also had a category of Africans who have decided to create their own religion, though they are picking a little context from the European. For them, they don't have a high charge. They're Africans and they have their own group and they have their own God and they believe their own way. Yeah, you understand? So, homosexuality is a European cultural practice used to destroy the African birth rate. It's a tool used as a weapon of war against us Africans. Exactly, Lando. And for me, it's always painful. It is okay for you to be homosexual. People do that shit. And baby, I'm not in the right position to decide which sexuality you should be on. Maybe I'm not in the right position because I don't know where you come from. I don't know the angle at which you stand to decide and say that I'm a homosexual. I've not been in your life. So, as much as I condemn it, I've not been in your life. I don't know why you woke up one time and you said, I'm going to do this. I have not been there, so I don't know. So, even if I would want to condemn you, okay, but maybe you are so ignorant about the truth. Maybe you are so lame about what is going on. But it's so sad and so unfair and very evil and bad of you to start connecting this to African tradition, like men were having men, then you start bringing those comics, silly comics, and you're trying to take this to the history. That wasn't the case. Even Africans used to write their paintings on the walls and everywhere. There was no man standing with the man as in they are married. Africa having children was very important throughout history. And then homosexuality was a thing that was used to not only destroy us as to reduce our birth rate, but also to discourage women from loving their men. That's why during slavery, in not only in Africa but also in America, homosexual or men, white men used to forcefully rape black men. Sorry, white men used to forcefully rape black men in the presence of their women, their wives, and their children. A white man comes and rapes your father in your presence, in the presence of your mother and you. And for me, when I look at black men doing that, I'm seeing black men being proud of the sins that were committed unto them. I see black men being proud of the crimes that Mzungu did to their fathers and to their forefathers, and they're embracing this crime. They're embracing it proudly and also committing it towards their own fellow black people. Me, that's how I see homosexuals. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But this is how I see, because this is the mechanism they were using to break the African family, to break their strength, because throughout history, even in slave trade, Africans, a woman played a very big role. And it was very hard for them to separate a black woman and a black man. So it was important for them to take away that privilege, to take away that sexual connection between a black man and a black woman. Hence, they were always raping these men in the presence of the women, to make sure that the women get sexually detached from the men. And when you are doing that and you're a black man and you're doing it proudly, well, I'm sorry, but maybe I'm forced to ask, how stupid can you be? Like, how silly can you be not to see all these things? Don't go by. Together. But anyway, Lando, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for those who have been watching us straight up from the first hour of this show until now. This has been the first segment of the day. We are looking forward to having you on the second segment. Thank you so much for loving and supporting Black Hot Fire Network. Thank you so much, the silent majorities who always watch and listen without saying a thing. We know you are there and you're always watching. Thank you so much, Lando, for always finding time to be here whenever we are here. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure having you here. And it has been me, Africa Maria, with my colleague, INNOSSETU. Tunasema kwaheri. We love you.